Hello, welcome to my channel once again. This is the part 2 of our assessing a protected resource on Microsoft Azure series. I don't just want to be writing code. So before we start with our code, let me just lay some foundation on what we intend to do, because this is something that we've done previously, just that we are taking a different approach. So what we want to do is that there's a storage account, there's a .NET application, and there is Active Directory. So we want to access our storage account. We want to allow our application to access some protected resource in a storage account, but we don't want to use some of the previous techniques that we learned in some of our past videos. So we've seen how we can do it directly using a connection string, just by using a connection string directly into our application, maybe through environment variable or something. We've also seen how we can do the same thing using shared access signature. Shared access signature is just a safer way of handling credentials, access credentials, because you can easily revoke it. It's time bound. It's not like connection string that you can continue to use, and there are other restrictions around shared access signature. We've also seen how to do the same thing using application object credentials. So application object, when you go to your Active Directory on Azure and you create secrets and you use those access credentials from your application object, client ID, client secret, and things around that to access the protected resource. So that's the third way that we've learned. So the fourth technique that we also saw was how to use managed identities. So we saw how we can enable managed identity on Azure, and Microsoft handles the entire thing for us. Then the fifth technique rather, which is what we are looking at now, is OAuth. OAuth. And OAuth we saw in our the video before the last video. We saw how we can implement sign in and sign out. Then in our last video, we saw how we can get access to access token. So OAuth uses something that we call bearer authentication, which is really make use of tokens. So we use tokens to authorize an application to access some kind of protected resource, which is what we are doing now. In the last video, we saw how we can display the access token, but now we want the application to be able to use the access token. So I think that's a good foundation to what we want to do. So let me share my screen. So what I'm really doing, this particular program took me a while to debug around it before I could get it. That's why you can see that the program is a little bit not really clean, because I did a whole lot of debugging around it. So the initial class that I intended to use was, so basically, let me just start by saying that there are 4 approaches to this. This is the same program that we use in our when we are displaying the access token, So I just made a little modification to access the storage account, and it's only to the controller file. I think this is the only file that I modified. This, as well as the index.cs HTML file. And the only thing I changed here was, instead of to view the access token, I'm viewing the content of the restricted resource. So let me just run us through I think I documented about 4 ways that I have tested that I know that you can use to access protected resource for a storage account or for any Azure protected service in general. There might be more, but I've worked with 4. The first one is using token. So these are classes. So classes that you can use. Visual Studio ASP deals a lot with classes. Before you can do anything, there are libraries that you need to add to your program. So these are classes that I have tested in the past that work. So the first one is token acquisition, token credential. So this is the class here. But unfortunately, when I try to work with this token acquisition, token credential, Visual Studio told me that it was deprecated and it's obsolete, I think. So it was giving me a warning and the program didn't run essentially. So I had to do away with this. So if there's a way you can make this class to work, so they were recommending another class called token acquire token credential, but I didn't see any program on the internet that makes use of that. So I wanted to see the structure of that. And even in Microsoft documentation, I didn't see any example on how that can be used. That's the direct replacement for this token acquisition, token credential. However, there are two other classes. Okay, I think there are three other classes that I saw support for, and I will just list them out. The next one is default Azure credential. It's also a class that you can call. Then also on behalf of credential, then environment credential. So those are the three other ones that I saw support for in Microsoft Learn, and you can always use. And so basically what is happening here is that we are defining a scope. So the scope is saying that we don't just want this access token to work in the entire Azure space. We want only we want to grant it access to only storage accounts. That's why we are defining this storage endpoint here, and we've added an API endpoint for user impersonation. If you can recall, in the last video we did this from our app registration. Then afterward, so I already used this in the last video, the access token. We are defining the access token. Now we are trying to get an access token. Then we are using this variable to get this string version of our access token. So let's leave all that. This is where the action is happening. So I'm not even using this. So you don't even need, this is not needed. This is also not needed. It's not good practice also to put this in your program. And this is also not needed. I'm not using them. So I'm defining the container name, the blob name here. Then I'm defining our blob client, our blob service client. We already covered this in our last videos. So when we're trying to access a blob, we saw how we could use blob service clients. So, however, what we are doing here is that we have the URI for our storage account here, and we are now defining environment credential here. So this is the method that we want to use to authenticate our application object to our storage account. So if you want to use the on behalf of credential as well, you will just modify this with on behalf of credential and it will still work. I wish I could open Microsoft documentation so that you see some of the parameters that are needed for this. So I think I should actually do that just to provide more context to what we are doing. So let me reshare my browser, because it's important we really know what we are doing. Let me just open that page where you will see the required variables, the required parameters that work with those methods. So I'm trying to get the page now. Yeah, I think I've gotten it. Let me go over to my Edge browser. I'll be sharing my Edge browser very soon. We're also going to come back to our Visual Studio. One reason why I'm even glad I am doing this video was that I only got support from Microsoft documentation and from Stack Overflow. I didn't see any program that covered what I was actually covering. Maybe I didn't search well, but that's the situation. So this can be very helpful. Yeah, so this is what we are using. So we are using this environment credential, and we can also use on behalf of credential. Where is that? On behalf of, yeah, on behalf of credential. So I just want us to see um the parameters that are needed. So you can see for environment credential class, for this class, you can see what is required, the tenant ID, the client ID, and the client secret. And take note of the how it's called. So this is the variable name. This is what you should use. And I'll show you how you can add environment variables to your Visual Studio. Yeah, and for on behalf of, you can see what is needed. Where is it? It's not here. Okay, so you can see the method. You can see string, 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 string. So this method takes in client ID, client secret, tenant ID, as well as I can't remember the last one, but it takes in 4 parameters. I used it, but I can't recall the last one. Okay, so let me go back to my Visual Studio. Yeah, so we are back to Visual Studio. Yeah, so I can see the last one. The last parameter is the access token. So you can see I have commented this part out. Client tenant ID, client secret, and the access token. So this was when I was using it, but I feel like for our case study, the environment credential kind of like works, is easier to go through. Yeah, so to add the environment variables, all you need to do is go to your project properties, you right click on your project, then go to properties. This video is going to be long. I hope it isn't so long. So there's somewhere here. There's somewhere called environment variables somewhere here. So you can just navigate through what you have here. I actually don't use these properties. I like to work directly with the launch setting.json, but I know you can also get it from project properties. Scroll down. It's somewhere here though. Somewhere here. Somewhere here. Okay, let me go to applications. So because of our time, okay, I've seen it. Is this it? Let me see, let me see. So because of our time, I'll just use the launch setting.json, which is kind of faster, but you can definitely get it from project properties. It's somewhere here. I'm not just patient enough to look through it. So let me close this. You can always go to your launch setting.json and add your environment variable. You can see there's environment variable here. There's environment variable here. You can add your environment variable here from your launch setting.json. Then let's go back to our controller. Let's go back to our controller. Let's go back to our controller. So from our controller, you can see that we have our environment credential here. Then now what we are doing is that if our client is successful, we are now using that client to get access to our container. So we are defining that we are using the container client. We are creating a container client object, and we are now using that to access our container. That's the container that is hosting the blob that we want to access. Then we are now using a blob client. We've already gone through this in our previous video. Then afterwards, we are storing the blob to memory because we want to view it, and we want to view it on the web. So we are not downloading it. So we are putting it into memory so that we can access it, temporary storage, and we've already done all this. So that's basically what we are doing here. Then we've gone through all this. We are storing our token ID to cache and blah blah blah. So if I go to the index.html, I want to view the content of the blob. So I want to view the content of the blob. So let me just run the program, and I would upload all my codes to our GitHub page. I will upload all my code to our GitHub page. Our GitHub will contain all the code. This is one code that you are going to find very useful because I didn't get it from anywhere on the internet. It was just me and Microsoft documentation. That's the working version of this code. So I got the ones that use token acquisition, token credential, but I didn't get the one that used this particular class. Maybe I didn't search well, I don't know, but you'll find it very useful. And it's something that happens all the time, trying to access a blob from an application when you want to use OAuth. You find, I think it's more common to find people that use connection string, people that use shared access signature or application object credentials or managed identity. But in the case of this OAuth, it's something that is not so common. So let me run the program and let's see that it's actually working. Let's see that it's actually working. Let me run it and let's see that it's actually working. I'm running it now. Let me stop sharing first because of the way Visual Studio works. Then I will run it. Then I will share. When the window is opened, I will share. You know, we are accessing courses.json. That's what we have in our blob. It's still running. You know, Visual Studio takes a while to run. So key takeaways. There are two key takeaways that I want us to take away from this video. The first thing is that if you want to access a storage account from an application, there are different techniques that you can use. And I listed out connection string, I listed out shared access signature, I listed out application object credentials, I listed out managed identity, and finally OAuth. Those are the five techniques that we've covered so far. There might be more, but those five, we've covered it so far. Then the second key takeaway is that the class that you should use from ASP.NET Core, the classes that can help you to get this done: token acquisition, token credential class, token acquirer, token credential class, default Azure credential, on behalf of credential, and environment credential. And all these classes, you can go through Microsoft documentation on how they can be used. One of them is deprecated, which is token acquisition, token credential, but you can use the other four. You can use the other four. So now let me share my screen. It has loaded already, and there are no errors, which is good news. Yeah, I believe you can see my screen. Now you can see the restricted resource, which is what we have in our blob. You can see it, the restricted resource is, and you can see the content of the blob. This content is from our Azure account. You can see it over here clearly. So I think this video is quite useful. I need to log out. If I do not log out, my token ID will be stored in my cache, in my browser, and the next time I'm running this program, I will be having issues, except I clear my browsing history, which was the issue we were having in the last video. But I've logged out now and everything will be good. So let me just go to my storage account so that you will see that the content was really gotten from there. Let me just show you the storage account. Okay, so it's opening. Hopefully this video wouldn't be up to 40 minutes. I don't like long videos. Yeah, so you can see this is the storage account that we try to access, courses.json. And if I should go to the controller, okay, let me go to my own storage account. Frank. See, the name of the storage account is Frank containers. Then data. You can see it over here. Yeah, so and it's the same thing that we saw in our Visual Studio. So that's the end of this video. That's the end of this video. In our next video, we are still going to continue with our OAuth series, and we are going to be looking at another techniques around group claims. But if you find this video helpful, don't hesitate to like, share, and subscribe. Have a good day, everyone.